Hello, my tens of dozens of listeners slash watchers. We're joined again by Mr. Brad Behn. Um, we we're going to talk a little bit more specifically today about reeds. Um, I'm actually part of why the scheduling's been a little behind is because we finally started playing again. So I had to work in the rehearsals and stuff. But for this upcoming concert, I broke in a 10 pack of your brios. So far, I've been having a good experience. They were probably the easiest reeds that I've had to break in. My usual routine. It's a couple of days of just making sure everything's stable, and if any adjustments need to be made, I'll do them as we go. But though I had one reed go sour, and that was because I think I chipped it out by accident just out of the packaging.
Oh.
So that wasn't necessarily the reed's fault. That was mine. But I wanted to let's start with that. Maybe you could tell the audience about the reeds that you're offering, and maybe we can dig into a little bit to your concept of what a good reed is and what it should do. Does it sound good?
Yeah, sure, you bet. Thanks for inviting me, Frank. It's always a pleasure. It's nice to see you again, and I'm glad that you're playing more and busy in the world of music making in a live setting. Finally, we're getting back.
Yeah, busy is good. And I've seen you're back in the rehearsals out there as well, right?
Yeah. We started in February and have been going, making up things that were canceled from early on in the pandemic. So it was a very busy winter and spring. We went straight all the way until the 4th of July, and now we've got a month or 6 weeks break. So I'm enjoying catching my breath. It was fun. So reeds are obviously an important part of the playing experience. I think the reed is perhaps the most important piece of your equipment. I mean, other than the concept that we have in our brain, the next thing downstream in creating a fine playing experience and a beautiful sound, I think, is the reed, and then the mouthpiece, and then it keeps on going from there. And the reed is perhaps 10 times as important as the next thing. I'm a mouthpiece guy. I make mouthpieces, but the reed, you have to have a good reed that suits the mouthpiece and suits the player, the approach, the style, in order to get that synergistic kind of experience that becomes more than the sum of the parts. And so back, talking about what is a good reed. Well, I'll start with some of my gripes as a clarinetist, and then the idea is to find a reed that is absent to those gripes. And why am I looking at it from a cynical point of view? Well, one thing we clarinetists all share is our hate for the reeds, right? Everybody dislikes every reed, every type of reed out there. They have little good to say. And that's because it's hard. It's hard. And the answer to that simple reality, it's hard to find a good. We have to persevere, and we have to learn the art of reed craft, and that's more than just working a knife, but it's selection, how to find a good reed. And so when I set about making reeds available through my business, it really started with, as a mouthpiece maker, I'd go to the trade shows, and people would come to the table. Can I try your mouthpiece? Sure. And they'd slap their V12 3.5 plus on my mouthpiece, and they'd blow their way that they're used to on their B40 or whatever it was, and they'd assume the exact same product of experience and of sound. That's sort of human nature. Mm. And ultimately, I like the customers who come to the table and they're like, okay, let me find a reed or find a blowing style that suits my concept, your mouthpiece. Let's dance here for a few moments. Doesn't take long, just seconds, but come with an open mind and see if the result of that open mind is something that might be better, both feeling and sounding. And sure enough, the players who don't have that kind of open spirit, open mind, or perhaps skill set, flexibility based on confidence and years of just sort of navigating the waters of equipment and reeds and everything else, they would either leave with or without a mouthpiece. Well, the person who's not necessarily, after that first blow, sold on my mouthpieces, it's probably not because the mouthpiece is bad, but because the reed is ill-suited to it. So I would have a bag of reeds that I had selected or prepared, or I knew were of the right strength, that were not pre-selected or prepared, but something that was going to give them a better immediate go. And so I would just give that person, that prospective customer, a reed, a good reed. Not that the V12 3.5 Plus is a bad reed, but it's just a bad reed on this mouthpiece. So then the conversation would flourish, would blossom, would be met with similar, both sides, enthusiasm towards something that is new, that can be mind-blowing. So after a while, I learned what type of reed shape, what type of cane, what type of strength was best suited to the majority of clarinetists out there on my mouthpieces. And shortly after that discovery, I decided I would work with a reed manufacturer to produce my shape on the type of cane that would serve, and graded in strengths in a range that would best serve my mouthpieces, and I dare say would bring them to a real running start to the ultimate playing experience. I mean, a lot of people play my mouthpieces on, Van Doren blue boxes or V12s or Diodario, this or that. But I think ultimately they're going to have the best experience on the reed that was made to mate to it. So it just helped the business. It helped me sell mouthpieces, but it also helped me sell the spirit of concept that was and remains dear to me. Effervescence, focus, core, spread free, no spread in the sound. Range that can be produced with stability. By that I mean you can blow through the instrument and produce a wide range of dynamics, colors, shapes of sounds in a very comfortable way that is based upon security and stability of response. Because when conductor goes there, you need to be able to go. Right. And some mouthpieces, some reed combinations, conductor goes like this, and you go, oh, we don't want that. Efficiency, I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that connects most organically to the clarinet artistry, the person, the being, their natural interface, without having to work too hard. Yeah. So I've made my reeds to allow for that.
Well, so far that's been my experience with this batch of reeds. It's I may go another partial strength higher next round. I tried to compare, but yeah, I've noticed everything's very much within my control, up and down the full range. It took a little bit to kind of, I guess it's kind of like, changing out your stock tires for a performance set. You kind of got to get used to what that performance set is capable of. But had to hone in a little bit about the response and get my tongue kind of coordinated again. I mean, part of that was just getting back to playing too. But yeah, no, it's and we've discussed this before. I think we share our we share our ideals of what clarinet sound and playing should be, and it's served me well. You know, this design of reed has served me well so far. Now I'm looking forward to bringing it out for concert in, was it this we're recording this on July 14th, and our next concert is coming up Saturday the 31st. So pretty well broken in, getting comfortable with them, and you know, get to share that with an audience too.
Nice. Well, you know, when I got back after 9 months of pandemic life, my first thinking was when I went on stage, oh, I've gotten used to something that's a little bit softer, you know, like a 3.5 when I should be on a 4. And then I quickly adjusted and everything was fine. But also, it was really neat because being off stage for a long period of time let the true self flourish without any expectations. And so when I went back on stage, for good or for bad, that was very revealing. And yeah, my true essence is something that you know, a 3.5. I'm a 3.5 guy. So then the question is, can I learn to play in such a way that that softer reed can really sound good, and I can really function well on that big stage? And that was a very interesting exploration for me.
That so the on the subject of strength, I've had some discussions with colleagues around the Chicago area here. It seems to be a common practice to play quite a bit firmer reeds, and it sounds like, you know, more effort to blow as kind of the preset. It's not an opinion I share, but we seem to get along, you know, when we gig together. But I wonder, have you worked with customers like that where they want an experience that requires a little more physical effort?
Sure. Sorry. Yes, definitely. I mean, it's more common than not. I think you know, basically there's this whole thing that I remember when I was in high school, I was so proud of myself when I moved up to a 5.
Right.
And you know, like band directors, they promote the idea of moving up a strength of reed, you know, as clarinetists get better.
Yeah.
And you know,
that's our preset from elementary school. We tend to equate graduating strength with progress. But then, you know, I know for my studio, I try to remind people, like, there's kind of a break-even point, and then you have to work towards, or you have to work around what your equipment is designed to do as well. Like,
well, see, that's for sure. That's something, you know, we have various things that are, you know, the equipment is kind of a fixed entity. Your concert hall, your ensemble, the people you're playing with, all of these things, you have to fabricate your setup to enable the best version of you within that ecosystem. And so, you know, I know that when I'm, you know, playing, you know, generally speaking, whether it says 5 on the reed or 3 on the reed, I'm playing, truth be told, something after it's been broken in, warmed into its magic spiritual entity. It's about a 3.5. If I'm making a reed, if I'm playing a reed that's made by Van Doren or made by Rigotti or made, you know, by me, my comfort zone. I mean, look at me. I'm 6 feet tall and 140 pounds wet. I'm not this big hulking strong guy. So I'm not but I can play with a long, clear, resonant, rich tone longer than the person who's twice my body weight or my size, because I've got efficiency built into it. And, you know, I've really practiced the art of nuancing that 3.5 style strength reed, and I've made my mouthpiece to enable that type of a reed. Yes, I'll just say, the clarinet, to get a really good sound, does require some effort. You know, you can't play when a teacher says don't bite, or, you know, use, you know, these absolute words. Student might think, okay, I'm not going to bite, and then they just blow into it with no pressure, no embouchure, and they sound spread or worse. And like a New Year's Eve horn, my friend Ron Rubin calls it, just wah. And so there has to be some posture, some proper, embouchure pressure on the reed to control the sound. And that requires strength. It requires discipline. It requires practice to really get the best out of it. And I think that with some balancing the reed so that there's enough working resistance or cooperative resistance so that you can get a really good core in the sound, but also so that it blows through without being governed. Like if the reed is too soft, I blow mezzo piano and I'm at max. I want to be able to play where my natural range from super soft pianissimo to fortissimo, the reed can deliver comfortably within that full range of real absolute clarinet dynamics. And that requires a certain degree of reed strength or resistance. And I'll give you this, I'll add to that. That is more resistance than my natural body prefers. The clarinet is and me are incongruent. I think the instrument requires more of it than I, a human being, want to give it as I sit here with my, lazy, hazy summer vacation posture. And so I have to be smart with my reed selection and always view it upon the ecosystem, the atmosphere that it is required of me, my concert hall, my orchestra. And I have to be willing to practice in such a way as to give it enough work to produce the best quality sound. So that sets the stage, okay? Now, how can I make that as easy as possible so I can bring it down to my lazy, hazy summer, comfortable setting? For me, the solution is the opposite others, and that is to put the work in the mouthpiece, a little bit more working resistance in the mouthpiece, and fashion a lighter, vibrant, spirited reed to it. And so when you say you need to maybe come down a string, I get that a lot. For somebody who may or may not be playing, if you're playing on a non-Behn mouthpiece, chances are, if you're used to playing on, say, string 4, and you get a Behn reed that says string 4 on it, it will feel light compared to what you're used to. And but if you go to the Behn mouthpiece, that 4 will feel like the 4 you're used to. But it will be more responsive and more, I think, in the pocket where resonance is concerned. So, my goal is to create a system, mouthpiece and reed, that is producing the best quality of sound with the least amount of effort for me to get that really good quality that is really resonant. Now in Chicago, you're talking about, that some people are playing on heavier reeds and everything. I know that, I went to school in Chicago, and I know that there's this wonderful Midwest core solidity, I think of, that is so beautifully presented from Chicago, and it's not the same quality or core sound that we get in other parts of the country, but I think the best rendered versions of it, I don't hear the effort as a bother. Even though they might have some effort, you're sitting up next to it, right? And you're experiencing that person perhaps working a little more than you. What do I hear from the audience? Pretty darn good. Now, I bet the person who's working less, if they're well schooled in the art of, maintaining the sound from the embouchure, they've got more interesting components of art that they can address in their musicianship. It's more immediately accessible. So can I have all of those nuances and artistic choices available to me with immediacy, unencumbered, but still maintain that beautiful solid core resonance. That's the goal. That's the thing with reeds. There's no limit to the possible, styles, shapes, cane, concepts, and there are so many different approaches. No two people have the same break-in process, and it's just unending. And it's like a three-dimensional game of chess. So how do we make it simple? How do we make it so like the students and can have the base information to have a nice playing experience? And I think the key thing is start with the strength. Don't play a reed that's too hard. I would rather learn how to play a reed that's a little too light and play it beautifully than learn to play a reed that's a little too heavy. Why? Because if you're playing a reed that's too heavy, you're just training your body to bite and blow. Those two, blowing is important, but I think it shouldn't be blowing. I mean, I think it should be breathing and producing the air. You're generating wind. You're not just blowing. And biting, I think that there needs to be a real understanding, a relationship between embouchure pressure and what you're trying to do and how you're managing the sound and the response, dynamic with the reed. Am I trying to create a very staccato note or something that's very elegantly legato connection? Those are two different interfaces, and the embouchure should be involved. You don't just set your embouchure and forget it. The embouchure is an important arbiter of the playing experience. So there are all sorts of techniques we can do. Scraping on the reed. Do we scrape the heart? Do we not scrape the heart? Do we want to purposely make it out of balance because I'm not perfectly in balance or because I'm holding the instrument? Well, go ahead and try it. The basic thing is we should learn some very simple reed adjustment skills so that we can explore. And the best thing is we've all got laundry baskets full of old dead junker reeds. So, the easiest thing to do is just experiment, spend 5 minutes on a reed that was otherwise going to go in the trash, and learn from those scrapes. I personally think a balanced reed is better. And a balanced mouthpiece is better. It takes the guessing work out of the game. Now, if I'm going to make something out of balance, I would make the reed unbalanced to suit my embouchure more likely than I would the mouthpiece unbalanced to serve the embouchure. As far as because the way we hold it with our right thumb, I just think that's not founded in science. It's just Bernard said it. And so we think of it as true, and I don't buy it. You can rotate the mouthpiece ever so slightly so that you can find your sweet spot where balanced embouchure mouthpiece meet. There are so many other things that can be involved. And if you're using a neck strap or not, I mean, there's so many other conditions. And really having a very subtle interface between the embouchure and the reed allows us to very subtly control and nuance things. How you can turn the mouthpiece in mouth and so forth. So, the thumb is so far down from the mouthpiece. I think that it has less influence than what we're doing in mouth and how we rotate. So yeah, with all the shape and of the reed, I've gotten to the point where I don't listen to anyone. I listen to my own experience. I just get in there and I scrape on a reed and I try to make every single time I scrape a reed a learning experience. And then I have a basis of knowledge that comes from firsthand experience rather than what somebody told me or what I read in a book. Now that's coming from, having been doing this for a lot of decades. To get started, talk to your teacher, talk to you find a book and go online, check out YouTube videos and everything else and try to get ideas. But don't just assume because you heard it that it's right. You got to try it and see if it works for yourself as well. So I think the basic tools necessary, all you need is some sandpaper. You can have some scissors and You can use the blade of scissors to scrape. You can find a reed knife. But sandpaper is the least expensive and highly effective tool that anybody can acquire. And it's safe. You're not going to hurt yourself.
So, and for anyone new to that, we're talking like what, 600 grit, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I personally would use something a little bit between 400 and 320.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll use 320, sometimes I'll use 400. 600 works fine. I mean, the higher the number, the less aggressive the scrape. So you can be more idiot proof with the higher numbers. I watch out for, people talk about sealing reeds. I don't buy it. I feel like sealing reeds is you're just loading, you're clogging the pores. And and you're basically, what is a dead reed? It's a reed that is, the pores are so heavily clogged that it doesn't vibrate anymore. So when you seal a reed, you're basically, if I understand this correct, I could be wrong. Somebody write in and tell me where I'm wrong. That's fine. But basically, sealing a reed is taking it a few steps farther down the road of its lifespan, and thusly it's going to die sooner. So I like the pores to be relatively open for as long as possible. But a good piece of cane, defies logic, and it just goes for a longer period of time, whether it's clogged or not, it seems. So anyway, when you're using sandpaper that's 600 grit or 1,000 grit or 15, it seems to load the pores of the reed more so than more aggressive sandpaper like 320. I use 320 a lot, or even 220, because I'm very good at isolating a single fiber, a xylem, or a cluster of xylems. And I want the tool, that is the little folded up piece of sandpaper, to really cut. My endeavor is to remove material, and I'm very precise with my sandpaper skills. And so I don't want to just sort of be scraping or sawing away with 600. When I find my spot, I want to do 2 or 3 little gentle, well sculpted moves and be done. Yeah. So don't hesitate to try different grits and find what works for you. Again, there's no right or wrong.
I think that's one of the reasons I favor the knife for my adjustment. Yeah. It feels more like surgery. Yeah, yep. Like you said, there's a precision involved where I don't want to swipe like 3/4 of the reed off. I want to hit these specific areas.
For me, the reed knife that you introduced me to is by far my most common go-to tool, because I can work a single xylem at a time, or I can work a region, or I can scrape the entire vamp, or I can work the back of the vamp or up at the tip. It's wonderfully versatile. I use little bits of sandpaper when I work the very extreme tip of the reed, typically. And there are other tools, the Reed Geek, the ALE tool. They're all effective for material removal, and they should all be considered. Some tools are better than others for different purposes. The ALE tool, if I'm going to take a gig that requires getting on an airplane, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, right.
Just stick that in my keychain and I'm good to go. A reed knife, I leave that at my house because I don't want it confiscated. Sandpaper, I bring that along with me. And the Reed Geek is a great scraper. It's heavy, and it just lets me shave material. I basically use it as a scraper. By the way, I don't do anything to the flat side of the reed. A lot of people, they flatten. I'll say this: reeds, all reeds warp. Not just the bad ones. The good ones warp as well. When a reed is new, you wet it and it expands and it goes cockamamie, and then it settles, and then eventually over a few days or a week or so of going through these cycles, it starts to stabilize. And then you know what you've got. But you've got, we should talk about the break-in process. You got to let the reeds go through their adolescence of, where they're wild and extreme of emotions and personalities. From moment to moment, you don't know what you've got. After they've gone through their adolescence, they become mature.
Let them get through their reed puberty stage.
Yes. Yeah. So, when a reed is going through that process, a lot of times people will flatten them. And so they'll just flatten the reed into something that is, there's no more material left.
Yeah.
it loses its spine, its assertiveness. At that point, I've turned a 3.5 into something that is unplayably soft, or worse. I could start with strength 5 and play it and sand it and play it and sand it, but then I'm going through a week of playing a reed that is by definition too hard, and by definition I'm training my body to do the dreaded bite and blow. So I'd rather start with the strength that is true to me and just let it go through its adolescence in the bag with the humidity control thing. And then a week or so down the line, I'll start to really practice on it. And it's the right strength. And I'm never really promoting bad habits. I'll repeat, biting and blowing.
Yeah.
By virtue of it being too hard.
Less stress for you, less stress for the reed, and you both get to work together longer.
Yeah.
That's good.
Sorry. And at the end of that process, the reed is flat, it's stable, it doesn't do its wild warping thing anymore. And so I've simply flattened a reed without flattening a reed. I've just let it go through its wild.
Yeah. Yeah. No worries. They'll work themselves. That's very people-like to me.
To quote my friend Stu Hirsch, he says, the number one thing with reeds is you just have to be patient. I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah. So you mentioned break-in, a couple days. Do you want to share any more specifics about your particular break-in process?
Yeah, and it's a little bit eccentric, but it's really easy, hands-free, no problem. Hang on a second. Okay, so my Brio reeds come in a Ziploc bag. They currently do anyway. But, Ziploc bags are available all over. So the first thing that I do when I get my reeds is I'll just go through the bag, and I'll wet them all. And I'll just let them sit for 3 to 5 minutes, and then I'll quickly toot them. If I play them dry, they actually play pretty well. But then if I play them just seconds after having wet them, they play like crap. What? Well, that's because they're expanding. They're going through their initial, moistening phase, and they need to sort of, get into their new proper reality, which is a reed that's partly wet. How wet? That's another important conversation. So I just put in my mouth, get them, quickly wet, and then I'll put them down on the bench. I'll put it down upside down so the air can get at it from all sides, and so the moisture can just sort of expand into the reed. So after 3 to 5 minutes of it sitting on the bench, then I'll just play through them quickly. Just get a quick sense. Okay, now this is what I've got. And then I'll just throw them loose in the bag. Why? I don't throw away these clips. I save them. But I find it's fine without the clips, and it's a lot easier to get them in a couple hours or the next day, whenever it is. So now I've got 10 reeds in the Ziploc bag, and then I'll let them sort of continue to sort of very slowly dry to a level of humidity which is about 70%. And then I'll play through them again the next day, or maybe a few hours later, and just play through them. It takes just a minute or two, and I'll put them all away. And I'll do this at least once a day for a week. And then after the third or fourth play session, if the reed is obviously really bad, I'll pitch it. But I won't pitch a reed for the first several play checks. And then after I've gone through and pitched the really bad ones, I might have pitched 1 to 3 reeds. I'll have 7 or 9 well-playing reeds that are worth continued explorations. At that point, I feel like they're worth putting in my reed case and starting to really practice on, and they're worth starting to very carefully do little scrapes if I feel like I need to do a little balancing or some such. The reeds are made balanced, but reeds are also made from cane, which can be out of balance. There might be a little bit of a denser side and a little bit less dense side, so you can work on the harder, less flexy portion of the reed with your sandpaper or your knife. But the break-in process is as simple as that. Just wet them, play them, and then put them in the Ziploc bag, and just let them sit in the Ziploc bag. Maybe I don't seal the bag. Maybe I'll just pinch it in the middle and let some air get into it. I don't use the humidity pack or anything like that. I just let them sit in their own humidity. And if you got mold, then the reeds are way too wet when you put them away. So how wet are the reeds during their break-in process? I call it the incubation bag, by the way. I'm incubating the reeds. So I'm not practicing or muscling through heavy reeds during a heavy, hard-headed break-in process. I'm letting them break in without me learning to play the clarinet incorrectly.
No.
So by incubating, by going through the process in the bag, it liberates me to do other things and to be healthy when I interface with the instrument. So after they've gone through the incubation, then I do put them in a real case, and that case is my go case. It goes, it protects the reeds and everything. But here they're not protected; they're loose in the Ziploc bag. So I'm careful where I put them on my bench. And I should say, when I put them in my hard case, I do use a two-way humidity pack, 70% Bovida, B-O-V-I-D-A. They're like $2 a piece on Amazon. And they last 6 weeks, couple of months, something like that.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of products like that at the cigar shops. It's the same deal, like 70% humidity.
It's the exact same thing, yeah.
But that sounds a lot like the process I do. About a week, very light playing. It's interesting, all the kind of like living thing type analogies with the reeds. I mean, they were alive at some point, but the whole process of break-in, it reminds me a lot of like warming up your muscles before you do a workout. If you just jump in 100% cold, you're going to break something or pull something. And that's kind of the analogy I see with new reeds. Like this is a new muscle. I got to get it used to the work it's going to do.
It teaches us all to play at full throttle all the time. I mean, because if you're playing on a reed that's really heavy, just to get it going requires, like 3/4 of my physical energy. And then I've got only 25% left to make music and to control and do all the touchy stuff. Well, if the reed is broken in, it's easy playing, then I've got, it takes 5% of my energy just to get it going. And then I got 95, a much larger range, just as long as the reed doesn't top out before I top out.
Yeah.
This is it's a very simple process of, like how do now I've got 7 to 9 reeds in the bag. How do I know which ones are really the good ones to play on stage? Well, it's very simple. Just play the ones that go all the way to my top out where I top out, and they start as close to my beginning. When I breathe into the mouthpiece, I want the sound to breathe in with me and produce with clarity and resonance. By the way, I mean, I could play 10 reeds that feel wildly different, and I can make them all pretty much sound the same to you on the other side of Zoom. Because what you're hearing is the reed vibrating. You're not feeling anything that I'm experiencing. But if I have to make music with all of those 10 reeds, only 1 or 2 of them are really going to be delivering all the goods with me. Because that's where your selection process, I think, really needs to be in high calibration. It needs to be really tuned to the needs of the playing experience. Find a particularly challenging, touchy connection between two notes and let that guide your reed selection. If those two notes are troublesome in that concert, then those two notes shall define your reed selection. I'm always letting the repertoire of the week very crucially define what reed selection process looks like.
Let me go a different direction here. So you started producing your own in-house reeds. What is it you look for in the cane? Like, what makes good cane?
Oh yeah, okay. So I'll just add. So around 2010, I realized at the Clarinet conference that by giving a prospective client a well-playing reed that suits my mouthpiece, just at that conference, it really gelled. It seemed to work. And then I also learned that through subsequent conversations with those clients who bought the mouthpiece, how blown away they were and how their whole playing approach went on a trajectory that they became very pleased about, because it taught them this new efficiency and resonance spectrum that was very appealing. So at that point, around 2010, I decided, hey, maybe we should develop a reed. What was I playing on at the time? A combination of homemade reeds and Van Doren Blue Box reeds that I had remanufactured on my reed wall. In fact, when I won my orchestra job here in Oklahoma City, it was on a Blue Box Van Doren 4 that I buzzed, and I turned it into basically that 3.5 sort of strength. And so for me, at that conference, I decided, okay, I wasn't thinking I should make a Behn reed. I was thinking, just what reed can I recommend? What reed can I have, 10 boxes of these on the bench to just throw at, clients to give them a better starting point? Because the 3.5 plus, the 4 V12s, there were two problems with them. One, they were generally a little too heavy, or a lot too heavy in some cases. And two, the shape, there isn't a tip, and there's a lot of wood in the back. So they were fighting lack of vibrations at the tip, and they were fighting the wood in the back, or back half where the lip is pressing. So there was like this bite that was required to get it to go. And so those reeds worked well on, like B40 or, the M30 at the time, which was very popular, because they had longer facings, and, that added wood in the back would be freed up by the facing length of those types of that, especially the M30. That wasn't where I was in my heart at the time with my mouthpiece design. I was making shorter facings that weren't quite as open, that needed a different shape. Well, the Blue Box suited that better, but they too didn't have a tip. So I would remanufacture them, putting a tip on them, and then that really allowed you to go much lighter, but still have core and solidity of experience that the professional needs. Typically, when somebody would play my setup or even my reeds on my mouthpieces at shows, the first thing that they would be like, whoa, that's too soft. And then they'd be, hey, this is fun, because I'm producing and I'm getting response and I'm getting the sound that I like, and it's easy. The body is compelled to that as long as the sound is there and it delivers within the range. And to a lot of people, it's like mind blowing. And to others, they're like, no way, I'm not going there. It's not interesting. But to those that like that newfound comfort and ease, it's a very strong argument. So, but the Blue Box reed, I like its cane. You asked about cane. For two reasons. One, I think a Van Doren cane, a good reed by Van Doren, is made from exceptional cane. Two, it has to be from the thinner cut that is the blank of the Blue Box. You'll get more good cane out of those thinner cut blanks than you will out of the thicker cut options that they also make, such as the V12. Why? Because cane is denser and harder as you get closer to the bark. So a thinner cut reed utilizes harder and snappier, denser cane at the all-important tip. Does that make sense? And so you can thusly make the tip even thinner, but it holds up to the demands of a professional because it's harder, and a good one has more brittle snap. A good reed is brittle. By brittle, I mean if you fold it over itself, it eventually goes and breaks, it snaps. It doesn't just wilt and fold over itself. This experiment can be done with your wet reeds. All dry reeds will break. But explore that, with dry reeds from different manufacturers, and you'll find that a good Van Doren wet reed, will snap. And other brands I don't want to mention will more likely fold or fold farther. And those reeds just don't have the vitality and they're not as fast. So when I drive my car, I like a nimble handling, steering, and I want to feel the texture in the road, and I want to be able to use all of the throttle. I want to drive not just 1 to 3/10. I want to be able to use 4/10 to 10/10 on public roads. Similarly with reeds, I want to be able to play 1/10, 3/10, 5/10, 10/10 of that reed. So you need a mouthpiece that will allow you to do it, and you need an approach that will enable that, an embouchure, air interface. And a good piece of cane, circling back to your question, is crucial to that endeavor. So the first thing that I do when I blow through, after that week-long incubation, I'll blow through my reeds and I'll evaluate what reeds will deliver to my full range of playing. Right? When I blow 10/10 and when I blow 1/10, can I produce good core sound that is clean, without fuzz, without airy, non-vibrant inclusions? I call those tonal inclusions. If you're just blowing into the reed and you're getting airiness, that is a portion of the reed that is not vibrating. That's dead weight. You need to release the reed's weight somewhere and get that part of the reed vibrating. So ultimately, all of the reed is working for you. And then the good piece of cane, one that has good density, will allow you to have a wider range. I don't use the phrase range of dynamics. You just use the word range, because range can depict articulations, colors, styles, and dynamics. It's basically range, meaning your musicianship. Can you blow through it? A lot of people want an open mouthpiece because they feel like it gives them something that they can blow through more readily. And that is true. On average, an open mouthpiece will give you, with more reeds, blow through. But a good reed will let a close mouthpiece blow through like gangbusters. But it'll also give you something else, and that is real good core resonance with less spread, less likelihood of spreading, and it will give you, I think, an embouchure security and stability, one that is with less comeuppance. I don't have to bite the focus in as readily as I would on an open facing. And for me, I'm very sensitive about that. I mean, I do use pressures, but I use them judiciously. So the cane allows for a wider range, and I simply do the quick evaluation when I go through the post-incubated bag of reeds, which reeds give me a very soft, clean, dynamic sound, and a very loud, good core, spread-free dynamic sound. And then that piece of cane will likely be made with more density and with more. That's also a brittle piece of cane, which gives you more snappy, crisp, impeccable response. And here's the key thing: longevity. Those thinner blanks that are from the blue box architecture of reed, thinner cut, 2.8 millimeter, for example, versus 3.2 millimeter thick. Those thinner reeds will provide a longer lasting reed on average.
Yeah, that's been about my experience now that you mention it. All my experiments with thicker blanks, even if I get a sound and response I like, it never really lasts that long. And I find myself having to buy them more often.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting.
I'll add, for those that are not very confident about, like, I'm not sure about this, can I produce clean, soft, and can I produce spread free loud? I'm not sure about selecting a reed that gives me full blow through. And, like, these are perhaps very new, yet very simple to understand quests. Another thing you can do is just look at your reed. Some reeds are dry, even in mouth as you blow, as you play them. And other reeds, they get moist. They hold the moisture. They have really good water retention, and the water it just stays in the xylems even when it's 2-3 weeks old. It's not just always dry. So I think a reed that has good water retention is a clue for its density. It's not that it's so porous the water just goes through it and it saturates. It's more like you can see it, you can feel that moisture is there as a stabilizing force to the reed. It just keeps it, throughout its lifespan and throughout its playing session, two separate things, uniform in how it delivers to the playing experience. So look at your reeds. Some reeds that are white and kind of pithy, they just don't hold the moisture very effectively, or they just get waterlogged and then they're just flabby. Other reeds, you can see in the heart area of the reed, they just get a little bit waterlogged as you play for a long period of time, but they just have that good snappy vibration that's unending. That is a reed that I like.
Nice.
And that speaks to its density.
Would you mind talking a little bit about is it your in-house line of reeds? You have the Aria and Brio. Am I missing any, or is there something new in the pipe?
Yeah, so we do have something new coming. We have the Aria, which are we've had them out for about 5 years or 6 years, something like that. They've been very popular. And the new one, which came out about a year ago, is the Brio. And they're still on special. $25 gets you a bag of 10 reeds. By the way, these clips that they come in, just throw them in the Ziploc bag, and that could be your reed case. You don't need anything else. Works fine. Just be careful putting them in and out of your case.
Yes, I know that one from experience now.
I personally, my performance reed I don't use these because I would get nervous that I might clip the tip, and like what happened to you that day.
Yeah.
But they don't seem to cause problems where warping or stressing the reed out. If you're carefully working. And for a student, do you want to send them to the store as soon as they start studying with you? Go to the music store and spend $50 on a reed case.
Right.
Well, maybe you could just say, here, get a bag of reeds. They cost $25, and when you're done playing them, put them in the little plastic slip. Let me show you how to do it. Be very careful, and then put them in a Ziploc bag and make sure that it's not too wet.
Yeah.
You can wipe it on the heel of your thumb and get any excess moisture off of it. I think of how wet should a reed be when you're playing it. Think about that dish sponge. It's soaking wet. It's dripping water. Now wring it out so that you can't wring any more water out of it. Now that's the level of moisture that the reed should be when I play it. I don't play them totally dry. I don't play them totally wet. I play them so that they have enough moisture to function optimally. And I try to prevent myself from over licking it. Teachers often say to their students, wet the reed, now let's play. But they don't tell the student how much to lick it.
Yeah, so
and I think it's a crucial conversation every teacher should have.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of variations on that in the classroom. Some kids, it's like they just pulled it out of the sink or something. It looks so like dripping wet. And then I have to remind some kids, like when I hear the sandpaper sound, like did you wet it at all? Like, oh, but yeah, that's a good point.
And how wet is a reed to play? Well, if it was totally dry and it's been used a lot, the tip of the reed gets kind of crinkly, like a crinkle cut potato chip. And
Right.
so that means it's been improperly stored and it's probably not as new. A newer reed seems to dry out with less likelihood of that crinkle. And by the way, a reed that's all crinkled like that might not be made from the best cane to begin with. So, but nonetheless, wet that reed to the point where that's expanded and become perfectly flat. If the reed cannot get perfectly flat on its own, it's probably never going to serve you well, and you should just pinch it. Yeah, and reeds grow out of the ground, and so no two reeds are going to play alike, and so that's why it's almost an unrealistic objective to assume that you can have 10 perfect high caliber well playing reeds out of a box or bag. You're going to throw away a couple. You've got to be somewhat discerning. The student should learn at an early age. Everybody's sensitive. We've all got our own level of world of sensitivity that can be harnessed into the consideration of our playing experience. And then the conversation, well, why is it sounding bad? Why does it feel bad? Why are you having difficulty with that response? Is it you or is it the reed? 9 times out of 10, it's the reed. I found myself as a teacher talking with students, Beethoven 6, it's highly reed contingent. You've got to have a good reed to be able to play that excerpt well. Mendelssohn Scherzo, the same, it's highly reed contingent. Tchaikovsky, Capriccio, all of these things requires a good reed. And so why would I sell myself, my playing experience, my joy of the clarinet short with anything less than a fine reed? It's no fun otherwise. We should all learn the art of reed adjusting. I think it's becoming, unfortunately, a lost art form. And I'll dare say everybody who simply takes a reed out of a box and plays it and doesn't think about it more than that is selling themselves short. And it's really sad to me because when I hear the sounds of an era where reed selection was, and the craft of adjusting reeds was more in common use, I prefer those sounds. The sounds that I commonly hear today are the ones of a reed that's a little too hard on a mouthpiece that's a little too open with an embouchure that's a little bit too heavy-handed.
Yeah.
There's just too much force involved. Why should the instrument that is the clarinet be forced? I don't think, muscling it need be, an essential ingredient. We need to back up with support and proper care and, all of these well-schooled fine details, but they can be also couched within a certain comfort and relaxed exuberance.
I feel like some of that maybe comes from being told how we're supposed to sound versus discovering how we want to sound or maybe need to sound depending on your setting. Because why would we need to find our individual voice if you're just kind of rank and file and here's your issued equipment kind of.
Well, that's a very interesting side conversation. I think of the saxophone, the non-symphonic side of saxophone, the jazz, especially the tenor. They celebrate with enthusiasm. They demand it, that everybody have their unique individual approach to the sound and the style, and it's all interrelated. Whereas in the clarinet, we're all taught, it has to be this or it's wrong. And you're saying, well, let's explore what works for the individual and let them blossom through their own individual concept. I like that, as long as it's not spread. That's a pet peeve of mine. There too many spread tones out there.
Yeah, I think that's like part of the refinement of clarinet sound. It's a certain balance of freedom and control. So too much in one extreme or the other doesn't feel quite right. I feel like, I mean, and this is part of my taste in music too. Like things like uh, tango. Like there's very much a push pull kind of element in the way the music is written, and that idea kind of resonates with me for clarinet sound. Like there's should be that freedom and the projection and stuff, but it's always kind of monitored by this gentle pressure, this kind of control that manages everything. um I don't know,
Yeah,
that's
I mean, to instead of jaw grip the embouchure into a focused sound, how about squinting the embouchure to focus the sound? That's my friend Tom Kowalski uses that phrase, squint the embouchure to create. And I like that because it depicts something that's much more elegant. And when I'm driving the car, whether it's 1/10 or 10/10, I'm also modulating where the pressure is, on the front or the rear of the tire for whatever purpose that I'm trying to make, as I navigate a turn. Are you steering by throttle or by the wheel? And you can do either or depending on where the weight is on the front or the back, and whether you're braking or throttling, and this sort of balance, this dance that you have with the driving experience is extremely um, uh, informative to our clarinetistry as well. If I can experience I'm the throttle, and the balancing the weight of the playing experience, front or back, comes from how the feedback of the reed and the mouthpiece, how those two elements are communicating with me as I navigate the throttle, the air pressure, and the volume, and all of these things. To me, that if I get into that zone where I'm communicating with the reed and with the mouthpiece, and the mouthpiece and the reed are communicating back to me, and we're somehow interacting with one another, creating something ultimately which is stirring me to create a phrase, or doing something to a connection, or voicing that note, heating it up a little bit, or warming it or cooling it in such a way that I didn't even imagine in my head. It just happened. That spontaneous interaction of all the different forces and navigating in a way that becomes a joy. And you can't do that if you're always having to come up to it and you're playing on a reed that requires biting and blowing, because it's just, you're always, throttling it in. It's like you're the driving thing. Okay, you can tell I've been enjoying my Miata. But on the other hand, you could go out and get a big Mustang that's an on-off switch. You just blast down the road.
Yeah, hit the quarter mile there. What I mean, it's there's this is kind of the kind of imagination and visualization I enjoy, especially relating to a lot of these technical aspects of the art. Because it's evokes the more, I guess, the broader human part. It's not just the machinery that makes something work. I wanna get back to your in-house reads, if I could. I know you have a lot on the website, kind of discussing each of those products, and you have a lot on your own social media that you've put out there. Is there anything you'd like to share generally about, um, Aria's been out there, maybe the Brio, since it's a little newer, like maybe how it might differ from Aria.
Sure. So basically, from a playing experience, the aria has, I think, very easy blowing, warm embrace, and the brio has a little bit more of that sort of. It's all the sound, the playing experience is already placed in that high spot for you, so you can, where you have to voice up the sound with the aria, you can relax in, voice down the sound on the brio, because the e, the spread free, is really well contained in brio, and you get a really free blowing, warm kind of ease with aria, you might have to lift up into the sound a little bit. So for those that are seeking something that's a little bit warmer, more covered, the aria has, I think, a little bit more popularity. And for those that are looking for that real, true kind of old school French resonance, the Brio is really well suited. In fact, the shapes are very similar.
Mm.
The difference in design, the Brio has a score, or a file cut, where the bark is removed on the back of the reed, similar to what a blue box or a V12 has, that little line down where the ligature would be. And that frees up the long vibrations. And the overall thickness on both of them is very similar. They're both actually a little bit above 3 millimeter thick. I'll give you a scoop. I'm in process developing a third design, which is utilizing a thinner cut blank without the score. And I'll tell you about those details if you want to know it. It's still in prototype stage, but I'm very pleased about that.
We have aria A, Brio B. So can I guess it might be a C release?
Yeah, C. Yeah, I don't help me come up with a good C word that is something that is musically, derived, that I could use.
Right, you hear that, audience? A good C word, audience.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out the name, and it's partly like, what is the personality of the reed? What is the fitting with the brand? It goes on and on from there.
How about I don't know if anyone's used this for. I'm sure it's been around the clarinet product world. Clarion.
Well, that is a word that I've considered, but if we use it, I'll give you full credit.
Oh.
In fact, that's probably going to happen, to be honest.
Oh wow! All right.
My only, Brio and aria, they share a small number of letters, and so clarion is a longer word.
Yeah, suddenly, So.
But I love the word clarion because, I think Pine used it in some of his accessories, but I don't think there was a reed specifically called that. And, I think it shares a recognizable element within the clarinet community.
Well,
and it's true to the instrument, for sure.
That'll have me thinking now, how can I drop it to 1 to 2 syllables?
Well, I don't want to bore the audience with our making sausages, so to speak, in our brains, but yeah, there will be a third shape coming along, and it will also be made by the same factory that makes Brio. So because Brio has a very nice, snappy, core, dense quality to their cane. The cane is, I think, exceptional. And that extra zing in the sound that is produced by that cane, I think, has been welcomed by my clientele who have tried aria and wanted that. But on the other hand, aria produces something that's very appealing to those that want to have a instant ease and comfortable response. So
let me ask this. Have you thought at all about synthetic, like your designs but in a synthetic?
No, not really. I've experimented with synthetic, and I've worked on synthetic. I used to sell synthetic, and I've worked with mouthpiece customers who are committed to synthetic, and in all circumstances, fairly, I think, rich and varied body of experience. I've come to the conclusion that, in this bag of reeds, I can outplay the best of synthetics 5 times out of 10. By that I mean if I pay $25 for a bag of reeds, that's cheaper than one synthetic reed, and 5 of those reeds will outplay that synthetic reed, and the other 5 will be hit or miss.
Mm.
So those 5 reeds will certainly last longer than the synthetic reed, and I'm enjoying a playing experience which is far superior. So I mean, we're not there yet with synthetic. I did have a conversation with the owner and designer of one of the synthetic reed companies, and we talked about what I'm seeking and what my clients seek and why we're not using them. And he was very interested.
Mm.
And basically, it's the fast zinging part of the vibration. It's like it goes 7/10, and you can create a nice sound that, I mean, I could play a synthetic reed for you, and you might not guess that it's synthetic, but I'm having to bite it in. I'm having to zing it from the mouth. Whereas the good cane reeds, I can relax. I don't have to bite that zing. The zing is there. So now I can I can do the opposite, come away from the reed. That's more comfortable than coming into it.
All right. Wow.
So, I don't dislike synthetic, but you asked, am I going to make a Behn synthetic? The answer is no. Why? Because cane is better.
Mm.
And because, the manufacturing process, the consistency, the price, the quality of the experience, it's just better on all fronts. Where synthetic might have an advantage is for the doublers who have 6 instruments in the pit with them, and they need to grab a bass clarinet and then a soprano saxophone and a piccolo and back to clarinet and be able to function with more peace of mind.
Yeah.
But if for a symphonic player like myself, I don't see the need. And I don't know. I mean, there are some symphonic players that produce nice sounds on synthetic reeds, but I dare say I think they have a little bit more work manifested in their playing experience than I.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. At least that's what I've observed whenever I've been alongside those kind of colleagues.
And then try their setup. And then you'll be blown away. Then ask if you ever hear somebody and you're like, and your friend, can I try this? And you'll be like, wow, this is really kind of fuzzy and dull sounding. I have to really to get it to sound the way I want it to sound. And that takes work. That's my typical visceral reaction to the synthetic reed, whether I'm playing somebody else's setup or if I play it on. Now I do have a thing where I do legerification, where I take my mouthpiece and I take a leger reed or whatever the synthetic reed that is the customer's choice, and I optimize the mouthpiece to bring the best out of that reed, and it comes pretty close. It comes pretty close. But it's still, like 9/10 now instead of 7/10.
Yeah. Now we want, if we're gonna do it, be able to do it the whole way.
The thing is, though, I mean, that particular brand of reed, Leger, for example, I think it produces a more Germanic. I think of German sounds as a little bit more round, open, and dark than the classic French-American concept, which is big and full and warm, but has a little bit more concentration, effervescence, zing, and focus and core. And so, there is this thing that is so common now, and that is the fake German sound, where you're taking a French clarinet, like a buffet, and you're putting a wide-railed Zinner or a big, even a BD5 or something that has wide rails on it, and a Leger reed on it, and you can create that fake German sound, which is basically a warm, round, awe kind of quality that's very, very appealing and very attractive to the world at the wide world. But to me, it's lacking that kind of extra something that my teacher and my teacher's teacher taught.
Yeah, beautiful but different, and not necessarily a universal preference. I wanted to ask one more thing. You have last I checked, you have a couple other reed brands available. Some I guess different European brands and cuts. Is there some particular reason why you chose to provide those alongside your own reeds?
Yeah, before I went through the process of developing our own reed, I was selling those and developed a clientele who would come to me to acquire them. And I too play tested them and found them to be, well suited to my concept and quality products. So I was pleased with them, and they certainly helped my clientele find that running start that I spoke about on my mouthpieces. So it was a win-win. I've come to the conclusion, actually, you're the first to hear this, that now that we're in the process of really celebrating two and possibly a third reed that is being branded, that is really my ultimate. They are really delivering my ultimate. It's probable that we'll phase out of those other options just as inventory diminishes. Eventually, you won't see them.
Maybe we can rustle up a run on your business for the remaining.
Yeah. Get them while the supplies last.
Right. Now I know we talked about earlier on your process of break-in and adjustment, kind of like the best results kind of come from your own trial and error. But is there some book or video resource that you might recommend for somebody who's just getting into that aspect of their playing, like kind of a simple or maybe a comprehensive resource on the topic of reed making, adjusting, all that?
There is not a single book or a single resource. There's a lot of good stuff out there, and there's a lot of stuff that may be good to some, but it's not, something that I've embraced. And so I've come to the conclusion that I don't actively endorse any one resource, and I believe that I've come to the point in my own reed endeavors that I can, without hopefully seeming arrogant, I can refer to myself as a reed expert. And so, along with that, maybe this is just a sign of being tired, an old tired man, but I don't really seek out that other stuff, because typically when I read that other stuff, I immediately disagree. I mean, basically, if the break-in process is an arduous and complicated scenario of steps, I glaze over. I feel like this is totally unnecessary and a complete waste of time. And so there are a lot of people that are very methodical and schooled and disciplined about it, and they proudly present it, and they write these books about it, and then there's whole pedagogy, and they have all sorts of schemes about how to succeed in the clarinet world, and I think that it's not that simple. You can't prescribe a simple series of stages to any one thing that is clarinet, and it doesn't work for everybody. My feeling is the best advice is, get your hands on reeds and start working on them, but do it with smarts. Observe and learn from your mistakes and from your victories, your triumphs. And in short order, you'll be basically playing on reeds that you typically have worked on. And short order from there, you'll be playing on reeds that you worked on heavily. Now that is, I should say, there are times that I play on reeds that come straight out of the box or the bag or whatever. I don't work on them at all. So it's important that I remove my ego from the game and say, hey, this reed's great. I don't need to touch it. Allow for that possibility as well. But I personally find reeds very relaxing. It's a natural and comfortable and enjoyable part of my daily routine. 10 minutes a day keeps the psychiatrist away.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I appreciate your time today. We got students and things coming up in the rest of our day. Real quickly, where can people find you and find out more about your work?
clarinetmouthpiece.com. I'm also at BehnMouthpieces.com, BEHN mouthpieces. I'm sorry, BehnMouthpieces.com, clarinet mouthpiece singular.com. And I have a Facebook presence. Bradford Behn is my Facebook name, and there's also a page for Behn Mouthpieces. You can look me up there, and you can see my reed adjustment videos on that. All sorts of little tricks using sandpaper, post-it notes, and knives and other tools to help give you a better playing experience, better response, and more fun.
Great. Well, again, appreciate your time. I'll let you get back out to the rest of the world, and we'll look forward to your new stuff down the pipe, whatever appropriate C word you decide to call.
I think Clarion has got to be the winner. And thank you very much for the suggestion, Frank. It gives me more confidence that it popped in your head so fast. Because my wife and I, we were talking about it just the day before yesterday, and that was, among other words, like bravo and primo and, just various things that we were throwing darts against the wall. Clarion was at the top. And boom, it popped into your head. So we better snag it up before somebody else does.
Run to the copyright office or whatever.
Right.
Anyways, good luck with that. We're looking forward to its future release.
Thank you.
And whenever we decide to talk again, I don't know if there's another trade show coming up. Either that or online, I'm sure we'll run into each other again.
It's always a pleasure. Anytime.
All right. Take care.
Bye.